Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone. Welcome to another podcast Real Talk with Khalid Ajmain. And today we talk about grief, which people seldom talk about it in our society or lack of understanding on it. So on my left we have Sister Kismet, our good friend. Hello.
Hello.
And then on my right is my beloved wife Ainun. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I guess I have to Ini mo, who I start first. Okay, I think I ask Ainun. Since we are still in Hari Raya, right? Hari Raya mode. Obviously, no more ketupat and rendang. But still, the spirit of Hari Raya, 30 days of Hari Raya. Kalau boleh orang nak 30 years of Hari Raya, you know. Mm-hmm. Right? So, Ainun, grief and Hari Raya, usually people don't talk about it. Or they hide. So, but to you, grief can be what? I know, when we mention about grief, it's like the death of someone we love, and the loss of friendship, the loss of kinship. I remember my second sister lah. She was truly affected when my mother passed away. So that time she said, "I don't think I want to Hari Raya lah. I still feel sad." Because my mother died almost, I think, 5 months before Hari Raya. And she flew equator. But some people say, you cannot be like that lah. You know, it's Hari Raya. You must be happy. So what would you say?
I think I lost my mom a few days before Ramadan.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it was a very difficult period because I think she was central to everything in Ramadan. She was the one who handled
the logistic, the food and the logistic.
Not just that, but she was central to it lah. Then when we lost her, it was a very difficult time to adjust. I think the biggest thing is just the loss of losing her presence, and it was a very sad time. I think I personally, right, because I love her so much, so I actually already prepared for her death like way in advance. I think when I was in my early 20s, I was already preparing myself that she's going to pass away one day, because I know it will be devastating for me. So I already prepared since then. So even last time lah, when I go back home, I will buy something for her every day. Something small lah, the food that she loves. So those are the things that I do because I know that she's going to pass away one day. And I didn't expect it to come because she passed away when she was 60. So she was still quite young. I mean relatively lah. People usually pass away older, right? So it was a shock. And what happened was that she didn't have any disease, and then suddenly she falls sick, and then she was brought to the hospital. She was unconscious, and then 1 week later she passed away. And it was a shock to us, and there was no time even to process because it happened so fast. And I think Alhamdulillah, the thing that is really good is that I managed to spend that 1 week with her. At least I had time. But still, it was hard to process the grief of losing her, and that Ramadan was hard, and then that Hari Raya, I just don't feel like celebrating as usual, because anyone who lose their mother, they will not have the mood to celebrate, and we didn't celebrate much that year. And I think it is important for people to be able to process that grief. It's not easy to lose someone you love. It's not easy to lose, let's say, a spouse who you live for so many years, or lose a child, or lose a parent. It's not easy. And people are allowed to feel sad, even to cry. And I think because Hari Raya is a period where those songs, right, bring so much memories to all of us, because it's like our childhood. It's like ingrained. Each time we hear the song, it will bring back certain memories. So definitely Hari Raya is difficult period for people who just lost someone, because all the songs that you hear will bring back memories of your own parents or whoever it is that you lose. And I think that you need to be able to be sad and be okay with it, no? Because if you don't feel sad, then that's very abnormal when you lose someone.
Yeah, I mean, I remember lah. Sometimes you know me also. That sometimes when I listen to some Hari Raya song, I will still cry, and because I remember her. So it's not easy lah. But then it's also like what they say is like your coping mechanism kan. Because it's somehow macam it's a beauty from Allah. That's why I say like macam sometimes kita dengar lagu raya, we listen to Hari Raya song, is a different feeling. It's an opening. So it's like but I guess it's something that we don't look into it. I remember when my father passed away, and that's the weird part lah. Because when I was very busy, I was still young at that time, and he passed away. I was doing everything lah. I bathe him, put him in the grave, I mean the burial, and then everything. And the funny part, not say funny, I always use the word funny part. The part where I only realize about his finally gone, right, is like after the finish the burial, everybody read Fatihah and all that. So I say, my father dah tak ada. But I guess the impact is not the same, because I would say that I still have certain relationship with him, but not as impactful as my mother lah. But I guess people downplay. I remember, when my mother passed away, I always dream of her kan. Then Syed Mahi always said to me, read Fatihah and say Alhamdulillah. Read Fatihah and say Alhamdulillah. So I guess this is something that people don't understand about, that you feel sad, but at the same time, it is part of your spiritual growth and opening from Allah. And I remember that because even you, when you said that also, it was the same for me. I really imagine my mother to pass away when I was young. I guess because they are the pillar in our life. So it's interesting. How about you, Kismet? What is your thoughts on grief then?
Grief. Okay, I mean, unlike y'all, I've never experienced death of someone so close to me yet. Human. I think the most tragic death I ever experienced was my cat Thomas. Yeah, because like to me he was like my child lah. Because I took care of him for 18 years, and he was sick the last 3 years, and so it was like really losing a child. And the bond I had with him, like I think it's somehow, because humans, you can talk to them, and you love them, you can talk to them, and that, you can say I love you to each other, but when there's no communication on love, right, and you base it on senses and like, intuitive, right, and I just feel it's stronger lah. In terms of other deaths, like my grandparents and all that, everything happened too young for me to understand. And I think the human deaths that impacted me the most were my friends, because I just realized now that most of the deaths that I've been through with my friends, like it's all sudden deaths, and some have made me change. because of the nature of how they passed on. So it contributed to like my journey in finding Allah as well. And I think
But when your cat died, is it Thomas?
yeah, Thomas.
So how do you cope with it?
I mean I just cried all the time. Yeah, because I feel that he was the closest to me in this world, can say,
Is it because you don't find anyone in your family that care for you, that you felt that Thomas is the only thing that you have?
Actually, only until his death, then I realized, like, I'm thinking, oh my God, Kismet, why are you so affected? Like, and it's because I realized that I don't really hang on to humans, because like I realized that, hey, maybe they weren't there for me, like, okay, because yeah, a cat needs you, right? You feed them, you clothe them, but he was always there hugging me as I sleep. That was how he is. And even with my friends, he will do that with my friends as well. Like, he will go to them, like I had a friend staying over for a few days, and when she was crying in the kitchen floor, he came to her and sat on her lap and
Inshallah.
yeah, licking her face. Somehow he knows lah, like when you're sad or when you're feeling something.
I think it's something that people don't understand. Macam, even my friend, when she lost a cat, she cried. And my another friend said to me like, Khalid, only a cat lover will understand this.
But I guess also, right, because you see, when I think about Thomas, I think about all those who are taking care of their elderly parents, the caregivers lah, because when you're nearing your death, for old people, right, you care for them. And if you're a caregiver, right, your life centers around the schedule, time, everything, schedules around taking care of this person. Like, okay, you wake up in the morning, you have to tend to this person. And then after that, you go to work, and then, like your social life is also cut off, because like you have to come back, and then you have to tend to this person again. And this is an everyday thing, 24/7 thing. Even when you sleep, if something happens in the night, you have to wake up, and for some of these caregivers, right, I think maybe, who knows, maybe some up to 20 years they have to go through this. And that's a long time. And when the person they're taking care of finally passes on, it's a huge gap for them. Like a huge loss, because like, what do I do with my life now? Like, because for the many years, you've just been dedicating your life to that. Yeah, so I think, for caregivers also, it can be quite tough in grieving.
Did it affect your Hari Raya when Thomas died?
Actually, oh my God,
Because no more in the house, what?
Yeah, it did. And honestly, I think he was the reason why I felt that hey, why am I even here anymore already? Like I can just go. Focus for so many years I was staying put because of him. Yeah, and like when he was gone, it didn't take just like maybe a flick to my skin, then like, okay, that's it, I'm leaving, because he was no longer there. And speaking of Hari Raya, I actually bought him. This is sad because like on his last visit to the vet, on the table there was a sale of like macam baju raya, because I think that time, I do not know when lah, but they had like Malay like kain songket, for the cat, like, and baju kurung. And I bought it for him lah, Then I was like thinking, if I buy this, I do not know whether he'll last, but I just bought it anyways. And true enough lah, he passed on the next week. And every time when I look at that now, like, I feel sad lah.
You still keep?
Yeah, but eventually I give it away already lah, because I didn't want to look at it because it's so sad.
You give it away to where? Carousel lah?
To a friend lah.
Oh, I thought you sell at Carousel.
No lah. Yeah. Yeah. So another part of, you were asking me about grief, right? I think what we miss also is the grieving over ourselves, because I never get to experience like like your experiences, you all have experienced the death of your parents. I think for me, what I'm experiencing is the grieving over myself. Yeah, and I think when you're doing inner work, I think that's a huge part, because you're grieving over the parts that you held on so dearly, and then now that you're letting go of those parts, right? It's painful. It's a painful experience. Spiritually, I think it's liberation. But when you think about it mentally, it's letting go and grieving over yourself, which you are allowed to lah. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ainun, in a sense that people often say that if you grieve, you lack of iman. And sometimes people, they feel like macam janggal lah. In a sense, janggal means what?
Awkward.
Like awkward like you do not know how to respond then. So what would your advice be for people who say that, oh no, if you feel sad, then you are not having enough iman? Well, you cannot cry. Like what you say, it's okay to cry kan?
I think even the Prophet SAW cried.
Yep. When his son passed away.
When his son passed away. And crying is not a problem, because I think that's a human thing. Not being able to cry is a problem, because yeah.
But they say that don't be emo.
It's not about being emo. I mean, you live with someone, or you live with someone for so long. Of course, you feel the grief of losing them, no matter who it is. And I think, for example, like when I lost my mom, everywhere I go reminded me of her.
No, let me too also.
Because you spend such a long time with them, and of course it will make you feel sad, because you are reminded of those moments, those memories, and it comes back, and you should be able to cry. I think for me personally, I think I did cry, but then I didn't want to cry so much, because I felt that I will really lose it if I did. So I did, in a way, try to suppress certain, like thinking about her too much, because I think if you really love someone so much, there's actually something called you die from just being heartbroken. No? It's literally there's a real thing lah, that you can die from being heartbroken.
Okay.
So you should not get to that stage lah. So if it really becomes unbearable, then that's when you need either help, therapy, or else you need ways to cope with grief. And there's a balance. You need to find a balance, not to like suppress in such a way that you totally don't want to cry, don't want to do anything, but at the same time you not want to get to a stage where it's so bad that you are crying every day and you cannot stop. You just cannot stop for many months or years. It's okay to cry once in a while, but if it's affecting even your work, like let's say you're just crying all the time, if you're not, let's say you just go to work, but then when you come back, every time you are just crying and crying and crying, then I think it will go into an unhealthy stage, and that's where you need like coping mechanisms to help you to go through it. Like even reading Yasin and all that, it will help you, tahlil, to help you process that grief. And I think it's important to find that balance. If you think that you are going way, like for me, I love my mom so much, right? I know that if I let myself cry forever, then it will not stop. Because even now, right, it's been like 13 years, 14 years, but I still feel the pain of losing her. And the pain is the same, it's not even reducing, So that's been like 14 years.
Yeah, I remember when my mother passed away also. There's one Ibrahim Warda. He lost his mother at a young age also. And I asked him lah, how do you cope when you lost your mother lah? And he messaged me. He said, you will never be able to get rid of the pain, but you will get used to live with the pain. I think that's quite profound, but that's the reality we have to accept. Right. So for me, it's more like whenever I share with some people about certain things that you talk about how a lot of things remind you of your mother. I also like sometimes music, songs, zikir. But I guess that is also the coping mechanism. The thing that make you cry, that make you closer to Allah, it is actually a healing. And this is, I think, the balance that people cannot understand. There are people who cry, right, and they find healing. And I mean, even Sayyidatina Fatimah Zahra cried when Rasulullah SAW, her father passed away. In fact, based on what Syekh Aslam said, she even asked those who buried Rasulullah SAW, right? He said, how did you manage to bury my father? How did you manage to do that? How do you manage to cover his face on earth? And remember, Rasulullah SAW is a father to all the people in Medina, the Sahaba and all the people, all walks of life. And we saw that in our lifetime when the late Sheikh Hassan passed away. You saw in the video how people at Medina by the whole street, people wailing and crying, right? So it's also like our heart is like a vessel. Sometimes things pour out. And I guess people don't understand in between about expectations and letting go. So your tears can be a letting go. And it can be your strength also. But the way the world project tears, especially for men, is that, oh, you're weak. Or you don't have certainty with Allah. I remember Syekh Zakaria when he passed away. Many of his murid cried when we were tabu the pacai, is it? Tabu the pacai. I don't know tabu in English what. Tabu sprinkle no. Right? We were doing that. And in fact, before that, his wife cried. That one normal lah. Your husband, you live for so long with, like what you said, and but I didn't cry, when Syekh Zakaria at that time. But I know a lot of them cried. Then suddenly I felt the triggered the emotions, like, yeah, man, the man who cared for us had died. And then when my mother passed away, I felt that. And I don't know whether you remember, I've been asking people, like, is it wrong to grieve? And then people say no. That's why I get to know about all the knowledge about the Rasulullah SAW and all that. He cried, and the Sahaba cried. Even when the Sahaba died, their family cried. So it's a human thing. And today, after maybe 14, 15 years or 14 years, I begin to realize the beauty of our tears and our emotions. That we are made, Allah mentioned in the Quran that we are weak. Right. And it's a beauty, because I remember my mother herself will say, like, my mother, she herself said to me that she's going to die. My father also. My father, 1.5 years before he died, he said, I'm going to die. Take care of your mother. But he already on dialysis. So dialysis, you are on a borrowed time. But for him to say that, it's like, wow. And then my mother also, he said, like, I'm going to die. You have to take care of yourself and all that. And even before she died, she said, take care of your wife, take care of yourself, read salawat, zikir, don't forget your solat. That is your rezeki. So sometimes when you remember it, you cry. Because whatever she mentioned is the reality of life. Because once you give up things in life, you realize that, what she said is true. Because what is real in life then? What are you holding on then? That's why when my father passed away, my mother was always the one who initiate macam maulud and tahlil at our home. Maulud and tahlil. And I was the one, and people know if those who know me, they know that I do not have like so-called like very close father and son relationship. But before he died, Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala make us very close. I was the one who sent him to his dialysis. And the thing is that after his death, every week at that time, I was still young. I will visit his grave every Friday or Thursday. I will visit his grave. And because of his death, I began to look into what is the reality of life and what is the reality. I mean, we know in Islam, we accept death. But what is that death means? What is your soul means to you? And that's how it leads me to many wali Allah. It open up everything that I don't see the way how normal people see. But at the same time, when Syekh Zakaria died, then I like, wow. It's like another world of mine is gone. Then my mother-in-law passed away. And then my mother. And at that time, we started doing that sacred power of love. Right. Yeah. So, I guess sometimes people, there will always be turmoil that you need to deal with. And that turmoil is being human. Like Sheikh Abdul Aziz Frederick say, turmoil is part of your spiritual growth. Alright. And I remember I only read Fatihah for my parents every now and then, whenever I remember. And I know like my wife, she only read Yasin for her mom. Right. So, macam when you travel, do you still remember your mother?
Yeah, I think I do, but I mean, as years go by, of course, you remember them through like reading like Yasin every day. That's what I do, and I think a lot of things still remind me of her. In fact, even all her advice and all that. So people you love, I guess you remember them for the rest of your life. And even let's say like if I do any donation, my intention is for me and for her. So
Jariah lah.
yes. So everything, in fact everything that I do that is good, I intend that is for her. Because she's the one who taught me everything. She taught me how to do ibadah. She taught me all the things that I need to do, even fasting. And I think in a way, whatever good that I do, I make intention that is for her lah. So I think about it every day.
Yeah, I guess so. It's the same as me. And the funny, not funny, I always say funny. But, and the interesting part was just that my mother used to say that when she died, read Fatihah for her, so that we can always be connected through the Prophet and Allah. I was like, wow. And true enough, you felt their presence, and you know that they are alive in their graves, and we hope that they have a, beautiful life in their graves. And that's why we pray for them, we sedekah for them, right? But then again, people don't see it as a form of coping mechanism when it comes to zikir, when it comes to selawat, right? So Kismet, whenever you grieve, right, what will you do first? When you feel something, you grieve. You grieve that your family maybe not be perfect. You grieve that maybe you don't, I don't know much about what you went through, but maybe you don't have a good relationship with your father or your sister or whoever, or broken relationship.
I think, of course, the tears will come first lah.
That's normal lah.
Yeah.
Kita semua emo kan.
Yeah. I think grieving is heavy. I think after the madness of crying, I think it's talking to Allah. Yeah. I used to.
How you talk to Allah?
It's ugly lah, really.
Okay, ugly.
I mean.
We are ugly, we are sinners.
Yeah, because like as you get older, right, you just try to shed the niceties, you don't cry like like what you see on the movies, but you start wailing, and like for me, I think when I get that stage of wailing, I'm just talking to him, just saying whatever I have in my heart to him, because honestly, like he's the only one who recognizes my pain. He's the only one who knows how I feel. So I can only take it to him and talk to him about it. Yeah.
Is there any coping mechanism that you do besides zikir? Coffee?
Coffee is an addiction in another world altogether. But coping mechanism, grieving. Yeah, I mean zikir is one thing. The Quran is another. I think I have to work on maybe having other coping mechanisms like exercising for one. I'm trying, but yeah, I think journaling. Yeah. I think, and also journaling is, again, I write to Allah because I can't write in a whatever way, but I find that writing to him, talking to him is the best. Yeah, I guess that's my coping mechanism.
I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has their own coping mechanism, isn't it?
Yeah. I think actually my first impression of grief actually was when I was 10 years old.
You 10 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, because that's when my brother passed away.
Oh, okay.
He passed away in a drowning accident. So it was very shocking, and I think we received the news on a Sunday morning, and it was a shock to everyone. It was a shock to my parents especially, and they were really crying. And I mean my brother is the only son, so it was difficult for them. And that's when I saw grief for the first time as a kid. And I remember a lot of people crying, and I was crying, but my second sister wasn't crying. I don't know how she processed differently. I remember she was saying, she's 1 year older than me. She was saying like, I see people crying, but I don't know why they are crying. So people process differently. Anyway, it was a sad period, and I think it was very overwhelming for my mother especially. And that's when she actually played the Surah Yasin again and again repeatedly on the radio for months and months on end. And that was actually how I actually memorized Surah Yasin.
MashaAllah.
But I saw that was a coping mechanism for her, the Quran recitation. And it really helped her because it's really traumatic, because my brother is the only son, and then every time, like, even he drowned at Kallang River, so every time when we take MRT past Kallang MRT, it's like awkward silence. We know she's thinking about him, but then we just keep quiet, and so we move on that way. So that was how she processed grief as a mother. And also we had a lot of tahlil, of course. The tahlil helped. And I felt that's how people can process their grief, is through turning to Allah and finding strength from there. That actually in this world also, it's not the end. We have the hereafter as well. And we hope to be reunited with the ones we love. And that is one way to deal with the grief. I think that's how I saw her dealing with it. But in terms of grief of, let's say, not about loss of someone, but maybe grief over what you don't have in life, I think important is for you to see how you look at this world. Because at the end of the day, this world is temporary. It's not meant to be a place where we find that ultimate love. Permanence. There's no permanence in this world. Even if you marry someone you love, you will be separated by death. That is the reality.
That's what
the
Imam
reality.
Ghazali said. What?
Yes. So nobody you love, no matter how much it is your children or your parents, you will be separated and you will feel that grief. And that is because this world is not permanent. That is the nature of this world. And we need to think about what is permanent. So whenever we look at what someone has and we grieve about the fact that we don't have that, then we need to think about what is it what is it what is this world exactly. It is not a place for us to get what we want, and we need to accept that, so that we feel like, okay, we don't have it in this world, it's fine, we will have it in the akhirah, and we have Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I guess that's where we need to nurture our soul.
Yeah. So it's a process that the more you try to connect to Allah, He take more steps towards you. So eventually you realize that, no matter, and because we live in this social media age, we tend to compare and we tend to think like, okay, this person has a better life, has a lot of family, a lot of friends, so we feel like maybe we don't have. But maybe what we don't have is what is best for us.
Yeah.
Because Allah is always giving us what is best for us. So that is best for us. Maybe what they have is best for them.
Yep.
But we are having what is best for us. So you need to be in a state of rida about the state that you are in. And to get there, of course, it's not easy because we tend to want certain things. In fact, the biggest thing that we probably look for is love. And I always ask people like, what is their definition of love? And actually the real love that we are looking for is not a love that can be found in another human being. It's actually the love of Allah and the Prophet, and that is the pure love, divine love. And that divine love you can only get from Allah and the Prophet SAW, because Allah and the Prophet are the ones who love you more than anything else.
Yeah, it's true. It's a hadith.
And even even parents will leave their children in the in the hereafter. So we need to focus on that. If we have nothing and we grieve about the fact that we don't have family, we don't have friends, or whatever it is, we don't have spouse, we don't have children, then we need to think back, this is what Allah has planned for me. And what Allah has planned for me is something that is good for me. And we should focus on that lah, on the fact that this world is not permanent.
It's interesting because like my wife, I also lost my sister. My sister when she was very young, I was told it was malaria lah. But I wasn't born yet, I think. She died at the age of 2. So my mother used to share with me the story. But I also, how to say it, I also puzzled how she coped. But then I realized the people at that time, like, it's not only because they are so used to hardship, but they also do not have the luxury of how we have. Because my mother didn't grow up with her own mother. She grew up with her own auntie, her father's side. And her father's sister, my grandfather lah, the sister took care of my mother. And my aunt, both passed on now. And it's very interesting because maybe you're so used not to be that kind of situation where it's idealistic. So when things happen, you're able to cope. But I know my mother, like her mother, like Yasin a lot. And Tahlil also. That's why I always ponder, like, when I was growing up, right, my first encounter of death is my grandfather who named me. I'm the only grandchildren at that time he named, because I'm the only grandson. There are 2 lah, but all their father named them, really my uncle named them. So he said to my father, I want to name him. Then he quarreled with my father. And my father said, okay lah. So he named me Khalid. Khalid, named after Sayyidina Khalid Al-Walid. So maybe that has impact on me, because I was 4 years old when he passed away, but I can still remember that 4 years old. I can still remember certain part of it, right? So that was the first part, and that point of time, my grandmother sometimes she cried. So as a grandchild, we we saw lah, she cried. I say, why ni? Oh, I miss arwah Datuk and all that. And she always emphasized on tahlil lah. So at the kampung where we used to stay at Lorong Maidin, my grandmother used to stay, we always have tahlil. Always tahlil. Orang kampung always love tahlil. And I think this is a spiritual culture where today we debate, we argued, and we don't have time for it anymore. And that's the sad part lah. We don't have time. I remember growing up in the 80s, when my grand uncle or grand auntie passed away, they have tahlil on Tuesday, as small as my house like that, full. And they give nasi ambeng, Jawa, we all Japanese. And then nasi ambeng they cook on their own. They not order, no, they even cook on their own. So the community spirit is there to uplift your spirit. And I think this is what missing today because of our busy schedule, isolated life. You know, when I say isolated life, it's like more like individualism anymore today. And then also people argue about tahlil, you know, which one can or cannot. My mother always said, don't argue, just do. Don't listen to them. Which is true. And it works on me. And the interesting part was, when I was with the late Syekh Zakaria, every week we have Maulud and Tahlil. People invite. That's why I also memorize Yasin. I also memorize Tahlil. Subhanallah, it's interesting if you look into it. And that become our coping mechanism. So what people do, I mean, I know I was talking about that grief, which is important because it actually make you envy, jealous, pride. So we have to be very careful with this kind of grief. But the reality is that losing someone that we love, right? Like what I mentioned just now, you have to live with the pain forever, isn't it? And people don't understand that the grief is actually an ongoing. People always see it like macam, oh, you are not overcome it, or you are still living in the grief. But actually, it's not. You are actually still coping well. It's just that this grief is ongoing, losing your loved one. Especially Hari Raya and people like. So, we should be, what we call it, aware. I don't know the right word, aware or conscious or be mindful that if people grieve in Hari Raya, be supportive or instead of being negative. Right? So, and what is your advice then for this ongoing what we call it, grief, which we live through it. We get used to the pain.
Yeah, I think it's very normal for you to occasionally suddenly feel that grief again, you know, and cry about it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's not that you don't have iman or anything like that. That's actually a normal process of going through grief. That you, when certain memory, you know, you remember certain things, or even if you sing certain songs and you remember them, then it's normal for you to feel all those memories come back to you, and you feel sad that you're separated. No? Separation is something that, you know, brings grief, and I think we should not judge people based on that. And the important thing is to know, you know, not as I said, to know where is the line that, you know, between healthy grief and one that is unhealthy and that can affect you.
Ones that need help.
Yeah. So crying is normal, but the important thing is also to know, like, okay, this is only a temporary life, and you know, one day you'll be reunited with the ones you love. You know, there's a hadith on that, you'll be with the one you love. And that is important because it gives you grounding on what this world is, the reality of this world. And it is not a place for you to find the ultimate love, because I see even like in movies or in, you know, people are saying like, okay, you need to, I pray that you will find your ultimate love and you will live until Jannah. But the reality is that no, not everybody is going to find, not everybody is going to get married, not everybody is going to find love, not everybody going to find what they want in this life, and that's the nature of this world. Do you see anybody who's like 100% happy? I don't think so, because there's even those who are rich and famous, they have a lot of problems and they are depressed. Some of them are depressed. So this shows that this world is not meant to be perfect, and people need to accept that.
I think the biggest problem in the social media age, right, and advanced technology is that everything is being created.
Yeah.
Is everything needs to be content. Need to have content. Like macam, okay, like what Hani said in the previous podcast, like when you're 25, you'll be like this. When you're 30, you'll be like this. When you're 40, you have to be like this. When you're 50, like this. But then, when you look into the Quran, even Sayyidina Ibrahim, Prophet Ibrahim, he have his son, or Prophet Zakaria have his son at the age of 75. And that doesn't make sense, right? According to today's plan, or today, and who dictate this content then? Who created it? Is all these industry people where they try to gain profit from your life, whether it's your health, whether it's your wealth, your mental. And I think we need to be aware and conscious of it, isn't it? Right. So Kismet, before I end this podcast on grief, right? Maybe you want to sing a song. No. What would you advise to people then out there, right? You still have parents, but I'm sorry to say this, you're not married, right? And you reach a certain age. How do you cope with it? And what's your advice to people out there who seek something that they thought is good for them? Like what Ainun said, you meeting like, you have need to have this, you have that, but you don't know. Anyway, just to add on to this point, Imam Nawawi, he died at young age. He did not get married. Neither he had children. So was Sayyidina Abu Hurairah. Right? He did not get married and he did not have children. But society is driving us mad into this, especially Hari Raya kind of thing. So, what's your advice for yourself, how you cope, and for others?
I think my place in this podcast is actually grieving over the things that I don't have in life. Yeah, that society deems I should have in this life. But I can't lie to myself also that I do feel sad that I do not have these things, and I'm also grieving about these things. And as I mentioned just now when you asked me about the coping mechanisms, right? I think the heightened times where, like I said, I always go to Allah. That's it. Journal and do whatever things that can, get me out of this. And at the heightened moments, I think that my last coping mechanism that I do is, like the sunnah prayers in the night lah. And it's very different lah. I mean, it's a different experience when you are just crying and just talking to Allah, but it's a different experience when you actually are in prostration for a long time, because like maybe the first half of the minute, only the surface of what you want to say to Allah comes. And then after that, later on, everything in truth comes to Allah. And yeah, that's where all your truth comes out. And I think it's beautiful because, the prostration, who knew that we would end that position with our head to the ground in humility, right? It brings about all the truth to him lah. So that's my last lifeline of coping mechanisms, when I've had too much. So I can just tell people out there.
I think the pressure for you is also people, right? Maybe friends also, we say, or family say, why you not married? Why you don't have this? Why you don't? And you keep thinking about, oh, I did something wrong. I could have done something else.
Yeah, no doubt. Because like people always tell me, and I actually I didn't, because I was numbing myself before about this topic, and so I didn't really like pay attention. But right now, when I'm trying to be as honest as I can to myself, I realize people always say this to me, like, you're so nice, you're so kind, you're so loving, you know.
You so loving.
Yeah, like how come you're not married? How come there isn't anyone there for you? And honestly, it creates a whole mind warp for me, because like at the end of the day, I go back and I like, yeah, come on, man, what's wrong? You know, like if people say as how I am, then why isn't there anyone for me? So it's really a battle.
Political.
Yeah, it's really a battle in my mind, this thing, you know. And sometimes I wish people don't say that to me, because you know, you do not know what people go through. Like hey, you're telling me this, but and then you take it to Allah, you know, like.
But how do you deal with it then? Do you cut such people out?
I just how to say, like, I know these kind of things will come from people, and
Yeah, but then you can choose your circle.
these are people just like and sadly, like, okay, I mean, these are just acquaintances, like people whom you just met, and like, oh, you're 40 and you're not married, you know, what's wrong with you, you know. And like, yeah, so I mean, my friends, thankfully, my close ones, you know, they know better than to go there lah. You know, because they know my life.
Yeah. No, how do people cope with this then? Like suddenly people out of nowhere, she said acquaintance. But then you can also be your friend or your Tarika friend. Your Tarika friend said, you know why you're not married? Because you're not impressive enough. You do not know how to dress up. There are people kena, oh you like me lah, I also kena before, like, oh you fat lah apa. How do we deal with this situation?
I think this is the
Should we
easiest,
cut off?
the easiest thing to do. Yeah, it is to not talk to this kind of people at all. Really, like you see them, then you diverge and you say, okay, I have to go. And I think that's very important. People don't do that. Like they want to make nice talk, make small talk, and be nice. But you shouldn't be nice if that person has said that to you, right, and it affects you. Just, you know, don't try to talk to them anymore. You can just say hi, bye, and that's it. And I think people need to learn the art of how to cut out all the small talk and just cut, you know. Just say like, you know, I'm not interested, you know, give that vibe. So that's what they need to do, because there's no point, you cannot change people. So the best way is for you to avoid them.
I think this is also interesting when you bring this up, right? Before I end the conversation and on that this podcast, right? This could be another episode lah, but just touching on it. And I think the problem is that when people feel vulnerable, they succumb to it, then they don't realize what they are in for a relationship, isn't it? Because I want to be accepted. I'm looking for someone to accept me. I don't want to be grieved. I'm looking for someone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do people, Kismet always say, the truth shall prevail. Like, you know, you need to be truthful to yourself. So should people suppress or truthful, macam mana tu? You know, it's not that easy, right? Everybody has a different way of response. We say this before we end lah. It's interesting actually.
I think you need to be truthful with yourself, but you don't need to be talking about it to others. So the main thing is to be truthful to yourself. But some people think like being truthful means you have to share it with others, but you don't need to share it with everyone, especially people who don't understand you. So that is very important. I think people don't know how to draw the line because they want to express themselves, but sometimes they express themselves to people who you shouldn't be expressing to because they don't understand.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so with this we end our podcast interview for this grief. I remember two things I like, two important proverbs that I like to share. I call it proverbs lah. One is by Syekh Ibn Atta'illah. He said, "Do not be surprised with the outcome of this dunya, this world. And as long as you live in it, there will be sadness. Because the world will filled with tribulations, trials and calamity. And the only permanent and comfort is Allah. Another one is Sheikh Ibrahim Nias. He said, when you go through betrayal, or people are hard on you, or people backstab you, or whatever challenges or trials that you are facing, persist in that sadness because death is upon you. So remember that you belong to Allah and you will return to Allah. And this is something that we need to understand. And we need to work on it, on our emotions. Right? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us clarity. And may Allah ta'ala grant us spiritual opening, guidance through this grief that we will always encounter in our life from time to time. And may Allah ease our affairs, suffice our need. With this, I say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Take care. Join me in another podcast, Real Talk with Khalid Ajmain. Selamat Raya. See Raya. Okay, bye. Welcome to